My name is Luciana. I'm 34 years old, living and working in Dallas as a real estate investor. I used to think I had a firm grasp on my past. My parents, my family, even the reason why I had to climb my way up from nothing alone. Until one evening, while casually scrolling through a list of real estate auctions, I saw a name that made my heart stop. Luciana Marie Douglas, former owner of a luxury villa I had never heard of. And from that moment on, every memory, every vague sentence once said by my relatives, suddenly turned into sharp needles piercing through my chest, shattering what I thought I knew. Have you ever felt like your whole life was just a script written by someone else? If you've ever been betrayed by the very people who were supposed to love you, share your thoughts in the comments, hit like and subscribe to this channel, because what I'm about to tell you is the truth they've tried to bury for 15 years. I still remember my 20s, not through fond memories but through a mountain of bills, countless sleepless nights behind a coffee counter, and the anxiety that hit every time the bank sent a tuition reminder. I used to believe that was the price of independence. Everyone in my family would call me strong, hardworking, the responsible one. Meanwhile, they were busy with Molly. Molly is the daughter of my cousin Clarissa, the same cousin who died in a car accident when she was just 31. At the time, I was a 19-year-old sophomore in college, living off a partial state scholarship and 2 part-time jobs. My parents said they were bringing Molly into our home, out of compassion for an orphan child, and I didn't object. I truly felt for her. A 15-year-old girl who had just lost her mother. How could she not need a family's embrace? But gradually, something in the way everyone treated her began to feel off. Molly was immediately transferred to an elite private high school in Dallas, where the tuition was nearly 3 times what I ever dreamed of affording. Every weekend she posted photos of horseback riding, golf lessons, art classes, ballet practice. Her social media pages sparkled with likes and praise. Meanwhile, I was hunched over a desk in a cheap off-campus apartment, cooking instant noodles with a water kettle, counting every dollar to afford gas. One time, when my old laptop's hard drive failed during finals, I had to take back-to-back night shifts for 2 weeks just to pay for repairs. No one in the family asked if I needed help. Not a word. My mother, the woman I had always called Mom, still phoned to check in, but her conversations would quickly drift to Molly. Molly just got picked for the honors program, sweetheart. She was just gifted a new car, white and absolutely gorgeous. Your father says she looks just like Clarissa did, gentle and talented. I smiled weakly on the phone, nodded even though she couldn't see me, then quietly hung up and went back to polishing my internship application, trying not to let the tears fall onto the pages I'd filled with so much hope. That summer I took 2 weeks off work to visit home. I missed my mother, missed the scent of peppermint tea she used to brew every afternoon. But the moment I walked through the door, what I saw froze me in place. A lavish birthday party in full swing in the backyard. For Molly. I stood there on the front step, my suitcase still in hand. No one noticed me until a relative walked by and exclaimed, "Oh wow, Luciana. When did you get in? But today's not your birthday, is it?" My mom came rushing out moments later, flustered, pulling me into the kitchen. "I meant to call you, but I figured you were busy. And it's just a small party for Molly, poor thing, all alone." I nodded. Like I always did. I didn't want to embarrass her in front of the guests. I didn't want to ruin the picture-perfect, close-knit family she worked so hard to uphold. Months later I graduated. No party, no flowers, no "Congratulations, Luciana" banner. Just me and my diploma, standing in front of the school sign under the blazing sun, propping my phone on a bench to snap a few solo photos, then heading straight to my sandwich shop shift. Time passed and I started working full-time at a real estate brokerage. From tiny contracts to bigger deals, I saved every dollar. I never blamed my family. Even when they called me to talk about fixing the roof, I didn't hesitate. That house was where I grew up. I wanted my parents to be comfortable. Then came Molly again. When she turned 18, I got a call from my mom saying Molly had been accepted to Harvard but didn't have enough funding. "The scholarship only covers part of the cost, honey." Quietly, I wired $15,000 from my personal savings, the money I'd set aside to buy my first home. I never got a thank you. My mother texted one sentence, "The family appreciates your help." A friend once asked me, "Why don't you keep that money and invest in yourself?" And I answered honestly, "Because they're my family." But now, looking back on those years, From the expensive gifts Molly received to the silence I met every time I needed help, I realize I was never truly part of the family circle they claimed to cherish. I was the support system, the name they used when money was tight, the daughter no one framed in the living room photos, but always expected to show up with a full bank account and a soft voice. And now, discovering that my name was once listed on a property I'd never known about, it finally made sense. Some truths aren't buried because they're shameful, but because someone's too selfish to share them. I followed the GPS through winding roads up into whispering pines, further and further from the city noise. The deeper I drove into the pine forest, the quieter everything became. When I arrived, I could hardly believe my eyes. Before me stood a light stone villa with deep red tiles, white-trimmed windows set into ivy-covered walls. It was so peaceful it almost made my heart ache. But it couldn't calm the storm rising inside. A middle-aged man in a thick jacket was sweeping leaves off the porch. When he saw me step out of the car, he squinted as if trying to make sure. "Lucy Marie?" he asked, surprised and visibly pleased. I froze. "I'm sorry, what did you say? Aren't you Lucy? Clarissa's daughter? My God, you've grown so much. You look exactly like her." The air around me suddenly felt colder. Every word he said hit me like a wave. "Clarissa? Daughter? Lucy Marie?" I steadied myself. "My name is Luciana. I'm looking into this property. I saw it on the transfer listings and I have reason to believe it's connected to my family." He nodded, his face shifting into a more cautious expression. "Oh, I'm sorry. I'm just the caretaker here. But I do remember. There was a little girl who used to live here named Lucy Marie Douglas, the only daughter of Clarissa. When she passed, the girl vanished and the place was sealed for years. They said it was left to a niece in the family, but I never saw Lucy again." I thanked him, told him I'd contact the local records office for verification, and he simply nodded before returning to his broom. I sat back in my car, gripping the steering wheel. Clarissa Douglas. Lucy Marie Douglas. Those names swirled in my head like a needle twisting deep inside. I had always been Luciana Marie Walsh. Mother Helen Walsh, Father Martin Walsh. That's what I had believed for over 30 years. But why did the caretaker call me Lucy Marie Douglas? And why did his face light up like he was seeing someone long lost? The next morning, I went to the Routt County Land Records office. I explained my request to obtain a copy of the property ownership record for the house in Whispering Pines, using the parcel number I had pulled from the auction database. The young clerk politely took the information and asked me to wait. About 15 minutes later, she returned with a thin file inside a sealed envelope. "The last recorded owner is Clarissa Douglas," she said. "The original legal heir listed is Lucy Marie Douglas. There's a birth certificate attached in the internal archive. Would you like to see it?" I nodded, my heart thumping wildly. She opened a scanned file, scrolled through a few lines and paused at the birth certificate. Child's name, Lucy Marie Douglas. Date of birth, March 1989. Mother, Clarissa Douglas. Father, not listed. I had to grip the edge of the chair just to stop myself from jumping up. That was my birth date. The middle name matched. The year was right. But the name Clarissa Douglas under mother flipped my entire world upside down. I requested a full certified copy of the documents and agreed to pay the processing fee. By the time I walked out of the office, I could barely feel my feet moving. Everything in front of me blurred, part real, part surreal. I sat alone in my car for over an hour in the parking lot behind the building, my hands trembling as I held the copy of the birth certificate, my eyes locked on the name Clarissa. Clarissa, the cousin who had died 15 years ago. The woman my family always referred to as a distant relative, your mother's cousin. The woman I had never once called Mom. But the documents were clear. No confusion. No room for interpretation. I was her daughter. Not the daughter of the parents I had known all my life. I sat there for a long time. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. There was just an expanding emptiness inside me, like someone had pulled me out of my own memories and dropped me into a different version of my life I'd never known existed. Did Clarissa hide the truth from me? Or did my parents? What had they done with my real identity all these years? And why was I raised as Luciana Walsh when legally I was Lucy Douglas? I didn't find the answers that day. But I knew from the moment I left the land office, a new chapter had begun. And it wasn't going to be gentle, but it couldn't be ignored. I returned to Dallas early the next morning, my mind weighed down by questions too heavy to carry silently anymore. Whatever patience I once had for them dissolved the moment that birth certificate touched my hands. I needed answers. Real ones. No more lies. No more pretending. I called my mom and said simply, "I want to see you and Dad this afternoon. I'll be there at 3 o'clock. She hesitated for a beat, then replied, "Oh, I'll make some tea." At 3 p.m. I walked into the house I'd grown up in for over 3 decades. Nothing had changed. The antique pendulum clock by the entrance, the light brown sofa set they'd bought 20 years ago, the faint scent of peppermint in the air that my mom always liked. Dad was in his recliner reading the paper, but when he saw me, he slowly folded it. Mom stepped out from the kitchen holding a porcelain tray with teacups and some cookies. Everything was so still I could hear my own heartbeat. I didn't wait for them to speak. I opened my bag, pulled out the birth certificate copy, and laid it gently on the coffee table. "I went to Whispering Pines," I said, my voice steady, quiet, but deliberate. "I also got the records from the land office. I know everything now." Mom froze. The tray tilted. The cookies fell to the carpet and she didn't even reach to pick them up. Dad was the one who broke the silence. "Luciana, there are some things better left alone." "But I didn't leave them alone," I said, looking him straight in the eye. "And this isn't something small. I'm not your daughter. Clarissa is my biological mother." "Isn't that true?" My mother trembled, then sank into the nearest chair. Her face, always carefully maintained, was now visibly lined, no longer hidden. She clasped her hands in her lap, unable to look up as she spoke. "Yes, Clarissa was your mother." I stayed silent. Even though I'd braced for it, the words still sliced through me like a bitter wind. "She had you when she was just 18, Mom continued, her voice tight. "She had nothing. Your dad, well, your adoptive dad, was just starting to build a name in real estate. And the family's reputation, it couldn't handle another scandal." Dad cut in, "We never resented you, Luciana. When Clarissa had you, she fell apart. She couldn't raise a child. Your mother, Helen, made the decision to adopt you and keep everything private. It was to protect both of you." Protect. I let out a bitter laugh. The sting reached my temples. "You protected me by lying to me? By treating me like an outsider every time something had to be sacrificed?" Mom finally looked up, eyes filled with tears. "Luciana, you grew up healthy, smart, successful. Your mom, Clarissa, she watched you from a distance every single day. But she couldn't be seen. After the accident, when she died." "You never said a word," I interrupted. "You erased her. You buried the truth. And you gave everything she owned to Molly. Didn't you?" Silence. I stepped forward, picked up the document, and pointed to the line listing the heir, Lucy Marie Douglas. "That's me. My mother left that house to me. And I never even knew. I was never told." Meanwhile, Molly lived a life of comfort, Harvard tuition, new cars, vacations. All from my mother's assets. Dad exhaled deeply, walked to the window, and spoke without turning. "Molly is her legal daughter. Everything Clarissa left was in her name. That's how the law works. We didn't break the law." "Maybe not the law," I said slowly, "but definitely what's right. And what's true. I'm Clarissa's daughter. You can't erase that. You chose to raise me without a real mother, without a real explanation." Mom whispered, "We thought, maybe you'd be better off not knowing. That you wouldn't be hurt." I looked at her. "But I was hurt, Mom. Not because I was born out of wedlock. But because I was hidden. Treated like a duty. Like an unnamed expense. Every time I needed a hug, you were busy. When I needed money for school, you said, 'Times are hard.' Yet you booked summer flights to Aspen for Molly without a second thought." Dad turned, his eyes heavy. "We didn't think you'd ever uncover this. We believed you were okay." "No," I said softly. "I was just quiet. That doesn't mean I was okay. I gave up so much, more than even a biological child. And now I want to know, what else haven't you told me?" Mom covered her face. Silent. Dad didn't respond. But in the thick air of that room, I felt something settle deep inside me. They never expected me to find out. They thought I'd always be the obedient Luciana. The one who came when called. Who smiled gently when overlooked. But that version of me was gone. And what I was about to do next would show them that more clearly than any words ever could. I returned to my downtown Dallas apartment in a state I couldn't quite name. My emotions collided like underwater stones disturbed from long slumber. Anger, sorrow, but above all, a cold clarity I'd never known. It was time I faced the truth. For over 10 years, I'd lived like a guest in my own family. I sat down at my desk, opened my laptop, and logged into the financial accounts I had used to support my parents. I'd always kept records of every transaction, no matter how small. Maybe it was the years I spent working in investments, but I'd developed a kind of rigid precision when it came to money management. I never imagined I'd one day be reviewing all of it, not to plan for the future, but to calculate how much I had been taken advantage of. I opened a file titled Family Support, Private. The first spreadsheet loaded. First column was the date, second was the purpose, third was the amount. March 12, 2016. Roof repairs after storm, $8,400. July 28, 2017. Fall semester tuition for Molly, $11,000. January 15, 2018. Knee surgery hospital bills for mom, $6,250. May 9, 2019. Honda Civic for Molly after her old car broke down, $19,800. October 1, 2020. Property tax payment to avoid penalty, $6,900. And there were dozens more lines just like those, each one a slice of what I'd been building for myself. After nearly an hour of totaling everything, the number came to $112,300, not including smaller items that didn't make the main list. I sat frozen in front of that number. Not because I regretted the money, but because each entry felt like a blade. A moment I'd willingly given what I had, asking for nothing but one word: family. Every expense carried a memory. Like the night mom called in tears, saying the roof was leaking and water had flooded the living room. She didn't cry, but her voice trembled. I wired the money the next morning without question. Or the time Molly sobbed over the phone, afraid of being expelled if her tuition wasn't paid on time. I called the university accounting office directly and took care of it, just so she could continue her education. I had lived under the naive belief that I was the backbone of the family, that they needed me, that I was strong enough to carry everything. But now I realized, it wasn't trust. It was entitlement. A blind expectation so complete it had become cruel. I opened my banking app. Every action I took was calm and precise. First, I canceled all scheduled transfers to the account in my mother's name. Next, I removed my father's access to my personal retirement fund, the one I had once let him view for investment inspiration. Then I removed Molly from the supplemental credit card I'd opened for her during her freshman year of college, which originally had a $500 limit, but she had been using it like a primary account. Finally, I logged into the joint real estate brokerage account I had once allowed my father to co-sign during previous investments. I transferred all of my equity into a newly formed independent trust under my name. The name of the trust, LMD Foundation, for my own future. Never had the name Lucy Marie Douglas felt so peaceful. No more confusion, no more living with two names in two worlds. My phone buzzed. It was Mom calling. I didn't answer. Then came the messages. Mom, sweetheart, I just saw a bank email. Did you transfer something by mistake? Dad, Luciana, I just found out the fund account's locked. Call me back now. Molly, sis? My card was declined when I tried to buy textbooks. What's going on? I didn't reply. I set the phone down and exhaled. Less than 30 minutes later, the doorbell rang. I walked over and looked through the peephole. It was Molly. Her eyes were red and she was clutching her phone, furiously texting. I didn't open the door. I just stood there watching. A part of me wanted to confront her right then and there, to ask, do you even know what I've lived through all these years? Do you know where your money comes from? But I stayed silent. Not out of fear, but because this time things had to follow the right order. I returned to my desk and opened a new document, 10-year financial contributions. I began to list every payment, every date, every purpose. Each figure I typed was a declaration of my existence in this family, even if they had once denied or ignored it. I was done being the quiet daughter standing in the background. And I would not let another dollar flow into the place that had stolen both my youth and my right to the truth. Molly showed up on a Monday afternoon while I was in a Zoom meeting with a real estate investment group from Florida. She didn't call or message ahead. She stormed right into the office's guest lounge, red-eyed and visibly shaken. My assistant buzzed me on the internal line, whispering, "A girl named Molly Walsh is here. She says she's your sister. She looks upset." I exhaled slowly, excused myself from the meeting, and stepped out. Molly was standing in the middle of the room, still wearing her jacket, hair messy like she had driven through a windstorm. She spun around the moment she saw me. "What the hell are you doing, Luciana?" she nearly shouted. I closed the door behind me gently and walked calmly to the chair across from her. "Hi, Molly. Do you want to sit down?" "No. I'm not sitting until you explain why you suddenly cut off all my financial support. I haven't paid tuition this semester. I could lose my spot to graduate because of you." I looked at her for a long moment and then replied quietly, "I don't owe you anything." She froze. "What did you just say?" I met her gaze, not with anger but a cold stillness. "I don't owe you. If anyone owes anyone, it's you who owes me, my childhood, my opportunities, and the truth I never had the right to know." "What the hell are you talking about? You lived comfortably on the sacrifices I used to think were made out of love. You went to top schools, traveled, used a credit card I paid for, drove a car I bought. Meanwhile, I took out loans to finish college, slept on couch cushions in cheap rentals, and postponed my dream of owning a home so I could pay Mom's hospital bills. Only now I know, she wasn't even my real mother. So now you're making up some story to justify cutting me off?" I let out a soft laugh. "No. I'm simply saying out loud what I've kept buried for too long. And you, if you really believe you're entitled to anything, should start by asking yourself whose shoulders your entire life was built upon." Molly trembled. Her lips tightened, but she said nothing. I stood, walked over to the door and opened it. "If you need financial counseling, go to your school's student support office. But if you're looking for the truth, start by asking our parents." She left, but not like the proud girl I once knew. Her shoulders sagged as if something heavier than financial loss was pressing down on her. Maybe guilt. 3 days later, while I was sorting quarterly tax documents, the office phone rang. The voice on the line was deep, clear, and professional. "Hello, Miss Luciana Douglas. This is Richard Bowman, the attorney who once handled the legal estate of Clarissa Douglas." I straightened in my chair. "Yes. I'm listening. I regret having to contact you under these circumstances. But I recently received a notification from the county concerning a query about Ms. Clarissa's estate. Upon reviewing our records, I discovered a will that had been sealed since 2009. I could barely breathe. A will. Clarissa left something behind. She left everything to someone named Lucy Marie Douglas. The legal documents clearly state, biological daughter born on March 12, 1989. Can you confirm that's your birth date?" I closed my eyes. Yes. In the will, Clarissa requested that the house in Whispering Pines and all her personal financial assets, about $480,000, be set up as a trust for Lucy Marie until she turned 21. It took me a few seconds before I could speak. Then, why did I never know about this trust? After Clarissa passed, her family was listed as the legal guardians of Lucy. However, somehow they filed a petition to delay probate, claiming they had lost contact with the legal heir. At the time, you were still living with them, so that statement was completely false. I gripped the phone tightly. "Do you have proof of that?" "Yes. I have the petition signed by Martin Walsh himself. I've also contacted the local bar association to reopen the file. If you agree, we can initiate legal action to reclaim your rightful ownership of the estate that's been locked for 15 years. I looked out through the glass window. The city outside was still rushing in its usual rhythm. But inside me, something had just stopped, and something else had just begun. "Mr. Bowman," I said, my voice low but firm. "I agree. I'll see this through and take back what my mother left for me. Thank you, Luciana. I'll send all the legal documentation via email today." I hung up and set the phone down on the desk, still overwhelmed. But this time the feeling wasn't pain, it was determination. I wasn't just reclaiming money or land. I was reclaiming the truth, reclaiming the right to know who I was and to live as myself, not as a shadow others had built. That night, I sat alone in my home office, the desk lamp casting a soft glow over the stack of documents Mr. Bowman had just emailed. Every page was numbered, each stamped with the official seal of Routt County Court. I printed them all out and spread them across my oak desk, the same desk I'd used since starting my career. The very first page was Clarissa's handwritten will, notarized exactly 1 year before she died. Her handwriting was slanted, delicate yet strong. I read each line slowly as if I could hear her voice speaking to me directly, for the first time in years of silence. I, Clarissa Douglas, being of sound mind and not under duress, hereby declare that I leave all current assets, including the house at Whispering Pines, all financial assets totaling $480,000, and any other personal property, to my daughter Lucy Marie Douglas, born on March 12, 1989. Knowing she may not be raised under her true identity, I write this will to protect what she rightfully deserves. I had to pause several times to breathe. Each sentence struck me like a blow, painful but warm. Clarissa had thought of me. She didn't abandon me. She had anticipated that others might deny my place, so she had prepared for it so carefully. The next pages included an asset inventory. The villa in Whispering Pines appraised at over $300,000 at the time of the will, and an investment portfolio containing bonds, stocks, and savings accounts totaling nearly $500,000. Everything had been structured into a conditional trust, set to be released to me when I turned 21, under the supervision of a legal guardian. Everything was crystal clear. My name, my birth date, the relationship, the assets. There could be no mistake. Then I turned to the copy of the probate delay petition Mr. Bowman had sent. The form was filed under the name Martin Walsh, my father, the man I once thought was my savior. On the form he had written the reason for delay: unable to verify identity and location of legal heir Lucy Marie Douglas. The only person present to receive the estate is Molly Walsh, sole and legal niece of the deceased. I collapsed into the chair, a weight sinking deep into my chest. They hadn't just hidden the truth from me. They had constructed an entire narrative, carefully designed, and pushed me out of the only thing left to me by the woman who gave me life. It wasn't the estate that hurt the most. It was the deliberate deception, the cold-blooded orchestration that had stretched over 15 years. The phone rang. It was Bowman. "Hello, Luciana. I just wanted to confirm, have you read through all the documents?" I nodded, though he couldn't see me. "I've read everything. Not a single page missed. Do you feel there's enough basis to move forward legally?" "I do," I said. "Be honest with me. If we sue, what's the chance I get everything back?" He paused for a moment. "Very high. All the documents are valid and notarized before Clarissa's passing. Martin's actions were legally improper. And if we can prove intentional concealment of inheritance, not only will the assets have to be returned, but Molly may be required to pay restitution for wrongful benefit." I went silent. Molly, the girl I once called my sister. I couldn't picture her reaction when she found out everything she inherited wasn't left by her biological mother, but was funneled to her through a hidden share meant for someone else. "I don't want to turn this into a scandal, but I can't stay silent anymore," I said slowly. "I want the property rights restored. I want Clarissa's inheritance returned to me. And I want my name, Lucy Marie Douglas, correctly recorded in the estate records. We'll make that happen. But be prepared. This case won't go quietly. Your family may push back hard." I looked outside. The sky had turned a heavy shade of gray, clouds thick and leaden, just like my mood. I've lived my entire youth in patience and silence. Now I just want to live in truth, even if that truth makes others uncomfortable. Good. I'll schedule a meeting with the county estate office next week to refile the probate claim. You'll have the right to verify ownership and request an audit of the original assets. Thank you, Mr. Bowman. No need to thank me. I believe Clarissa chose the right person when she wrote your name in that will. I hung up. The legal documents on my screen were dry and formal, but to me, they were the last words of the woman who quietly sacrificed her youth to bring me into this world. And now I owed her one thing: to never let anyone erase my name again. The family meeting was scheduled for Sunday afternoon at the large house of Uncle Harold, my father's older brother. It had been the go-to place for every Thanksgiving, Christmas, and birthday since I was a child. Uncle Harold was a blunt man but always stayed neutral during family disputes. So when my father asked for a meeting to clear up some recent misunderstandings, he quickly agreed to host. I arrived on time, neatly dressed in a light blue blouse, black slacks, and carrying a bag filled with all the critical documents. I wasn't there to make an impression. I was there to bring the truth into the light. The living room was full. I saw Uncle Harold and his wife seated on the main couch, next to Aunt Catherine, my mother's youngest sister, and a few cousins I only saw once a year. They all stopped talking when I entered, as if my presence signaled the start of a ceremony no one really wanted to attend. My father stood by the fireplace, his eyes tense, though his voice still carried a composed tone. "Luciana, you're here. Good. We were just discussing Clarissa's estate and the serious misunderstanding happening within this family." My mother sat quietly in the corner, hands gripping the edge of her blouse. Molly was right beside her, head slightly bowed, avoiding my gaze. I set my bag on the table in the center of the room, slowly unzipped it, and pulled out a stack of documents carefully arranged in order. The notarized will, the DNA test results, and a decade's worth of financial summaries. "I'm not here to fight," I began calmly. "I'm here to lay out the truth that this family has kept from me for over 30 years. Every eye turned to me. I looked around the room, pausing on each face, then continued. "My birth name is Lucy Marie Douglas, biological daughter of Clarissa Douglas. This is a certified copy of my original birth certificate and the DNA test confirming my relation to her, conducted last week and certified by the Texas State Lab." I handed the document to Uncle Harold, the person everyone in the family trusted. He put on his glasses and read slowly. The living room fell silent. I never knew I was Clarissa's daughter. I grew up in this house as the child of Martin and Helen Walsh. But in truth, I was denied the right to know my mother. And at the same time, everything Clarissa left behind was wrongly distributed. I placed the will on the table next, flipping to the page where my name was clearly listed as the sole heir. Clarissa left everything, her house in Whispering Pines and nearly $500,000, for me because she knew I would never be allowed to live in my true identity. But my father filed a petition with the court claiming the heir couldn't be found, and directed all assets to Molly. Uncle Harold furrowed his brow and turned to my father. "Greg, what is this?" My father kept a composed face, but I saw his knuckles clench. It was a long time ago. When Clarissa passed, Luciana was still a child. We thought the best thing was to let Molly inherit. By lying to the law? I cut in. "You filed a petition to postpone probate, claiming you couldn't find the legal heir, while I was living in your house every single day. Do you know what that's called? Intentional concealment of the rightful heir. Fraud." No one spoke. I opened the final folder, the financial statements. And here is a breakdown of everything I contributed to this family in the past 10 years. Molly's tuition, Mom's hospital bills, home repairs, property taxes, totaling over $112,000. I never complained because I believed it was my duty. But now I see I wasn't just being used. I was stripped of my identity and my inheritance. A soft gasp escaped from Aunt Catherine. She turned to my mother, her eyes filled with tears. "Helen, did you know all of this?" My mother didn't respond. She just sat trembling, shoulders quivering. Uncle Harold rose to his feet, voice firm but not loud. "Greg, this can't be swept under the rug. Luciana is the rightful heir. She has the documents, the proof, and a buried past that none of us should have ignored." I turned to Molly. She looked at me with wide, pale eyes, her face ghostly. I didn't know," she whispered. "They told me that everything was mine, that Mom wrote it that way." I didn't blame her. "Not yet. You didn't create the lie. But you lived off a truth you knew wasn't fully yours. And you stayed quiet. No one defended my parents. Not a single person." Aunt Catherine placed a hand on my shoulder, her voice steady. "You need to reclaim everything, Luciana. Don't let anyone call you selfish. What's rightfully yours belongs to you." I looked around the room, faces full of shock, guilt, sadness. But inside, everything was finally clear. No more doubt. No more waiting for understanding or approval. I didn't come to beg for recognition. I came to declare that from this moment on, I would live as who I truly am. And I would reclaim everything that was taken. The hearing was held on a Tuesday morning, the sky overcast and colder than usual. I wore a light gray suit, neat but understated. Attorney Bowman had reminded me that composure was the sharpest weapon in a system built on logic. But I knew this day wasn't just about property. It was the first time I would officially stand as someone's child, as Clarissa's daughter. The courtroom wasn't large. Cold white lights lit the dark wood-paneled walls. Molly sat across from me, flanked by two private attorneys. She wore a dark coat, no makeup, her face weary as if she hadn't slept for days. My parents weren't there. An empty chair sat in the middle of the defense row, soaking in the judge's icy gaze. The presiding judge was a woman in her 60s, her silver hair tied neatly at the back, her voice calm but commanding, each word demanding the room's silence. Attorney Bowman began by presenting the will, my birth certificate, DNA results, and a series of financial documents proving my legal claim to the estate. Each document landed on the evidence stand like another layer peeled from a long-buried truth. Molly's attorneys tried to argue she had no knowledge of the deception, that she was simply following the family's wishes. But the defense faltered when the judge asked, "Which family wishes override a legally notarized will?" No one had an answer. I was called to testify. As I stood at the witness stand looking over the courtroom, a strange stillness settled over me. Not rage. Not hatred. Just a sharp ache rising from deep within as I spoke of my mother. The woman who gave me life, loved me silently, and thought of me even in her final moments. "I'm not here to ask for money," I said, looking straight at the judge. "I'm here to reclaim my identity, the truth, and the dignity my mother fought to preserve with the last clarity she had. I never had the chance to call her mom. And now if I can, I just want our names, hers and mine, restored just as they were meant to be." The judge nodded slightly. "Would you like to say anything to the defendant?" I turned to Molly. Her eyes locked onto mine. "I don't hate you," I said slowly. "I only regret that all of us became victims of a story none of us wrote. But if you want to do the right thing, now is the time." Across the room, Molly lowered her head. I saw her hands clench. Then suddenly she stood. Her voice trembled, but it was steady. "Your Honor, I'd like to say something." Her lawyer tried to stop her, but the judge raised her hand. "You may speak if you feel it's necessary." Molly stepped forward, eyes rimmed red. She took a deep breath, then said, "I didn't know. I truly didn't know she was the one my mother chose. I was always told I was the center of everything Mom left behind. I grew up in love, in comfort, but I never once asked why my own sister had to stay outside all of that." She turned to look at me. "My deepest apologies, Luciana. I can't imagine what it must have felt like to live your whole life in the shadows, lied to by the people closest to you, stripped of the chance to ever know who you truly were. If there's anything I can do to make it right, I will." The courtroom fell into silence. Even the judge didn't rush to deliver a verdict. After a few minutes of quiet consultation, the judge finally spoke. "Based on the valid will drafted by Ms. Clarissa Douglas on February 11, 2008, and the verified evidence presented in court, we hereby declare full ownership of the Whispering Pines estate, and all financial assets named in the will shall be returned to the rightful heir, Ms. Lucy Marie Douglas, currently known as Luciana Walsh." She paused, then looked over at Molly. "In accordance with the value of misappropriated inheritance over the past 15 years, the defendant Molly Walsh is ordered to repay the equivalent sum of $248,000. This amount may be returned in installments, subject to the court's approved payment plan." I didn't move. Everything slowed for a moment. Then I heard Molly quietly break down. No sobs, just silent tears falling from a face that could no longer maintain composure. I felt no satisfaction. No sense of victory. Just an emptiness slowly being filled by something softer and more honest. Perhaps justice, or maybe just the right to finally know who I was. And to live with that truth unapologetically. I returned to Whispering Pines on an early spring morning. The snow was melting off the roof, trickling down the gutters in thin, clear lines. The old estate stood still among the pines, untouched by the months of legal dispute. But for me, everything had changed. I walked through the wooden hallway, opening doors as if saying goodbye to pieces of memory I never got to fully live. The living room still carried the faint scent of pine wood and dried lavender in a porcelain vase on the mantel. Upstairs, Clarissa's room still held her rocking chair by the window, where she must have spent hours reading or writing letters. I sat down and opened the old envelope Lawyer Bowman had mailed me after the trial. Inside was an aged photograph, its edges curled slightly. A young woman cradled a baby in her arms, sunlight filtering through her light brown curls. I had seen this picture countless times as a digital copy, but holding the original made it feel different. Clarissa's eyes held nothing but warmth. And I, the baby in her arms, was smiling. A smile untouched by the storms that would come. I decided to sell the house. Not because I didn't value it, but because I didn't want my mother's memory sealed inside cold wooden walls. I used all the proceeds, after legal costs, to start a scholarship fund in her name, the Clarissa Douglas Foundation. I handwrote the mission statement at the top of the page. For young women who were abandoned, denied the right to know who they are, so they never have to pass through life as quietly as my mother once did. We awarded our first scholarship to a freshman college student in New Mexico, a young woman who grew up in the foster care system, passed through 3 adoptive homes and still pursued a degree in social work. When I called to tell her, she was silent for a long time, then started crying. I didn't say anything else. I knew that feeling. My adoptive parents kept messaging me for weeks after the trial. Some texts were long, others short. Once my father wrote, "Can we talk? You're still my daughter." My mother sent only one sentence, "I don't know where to begin, but I hope one day you can forgive me." I didn't respond. Not because I hate them, but because I've come to understand that some distances need to be left alone. I wrote only one line in a parcel I sent to Molly. Inside, I placed the original photo of Clarissa holding me as a baby, the only copy I had. I added a handwritten note. "We are all victims, but you can choose not to be the next one." I didn't expect Molly to reply. I only hoped she would understand. That morning, I drove out of Dallas, heading northwest. I drove alone, no music, no company. The breeze through the slightly open window swept through my hair, cool but comforting. The mountains ahead glowed softly in the morning mist, bands of clouds draped across their snow-tipped peaks like scarves. I no longer carried rage inside me. Just a space that had finally been filled with pieces of truth. Not perfect. Not polished. But mine. I thought about Clarissa. I wondered, if she were still alive, would she be sitting next to me now in this car, laughing, telling stories about being pregnant with me? Would she have said I kicked to the rhythm of music or fell asleep when she read? I'll never know those details. But I believe somehow she's still watching. And today, as I wind through the mountain roads up north, I carry her with me, not in regret but in peace. Because I no longer need anyone else to define who I am. I found myself. I don't know what you've lived through in your own family, whether you've ever felt forgotten, treated like someone with duties instead of feelings, whether you've watched someone else live the life that should have been yours, simply because you were the one who forgave more easily. I share this story not for sympathy, not to cast blame. I share it because I believe many of us are quietly living in those same patterns. We love. We sacrifice. And we become invisible. But silence doesn't heal wounds. Sometimes, to begin healing, we have to stand up and name what was hidden. If my story brings up anything that once ached inside you, leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts, to know what you saw in my journey. And maybe, see a part of yourself in it too. And if you're drawn to real stories about family, forgiveness, truth, and the courage to reclaim who you are, follow this channel. I'll keep sharing, not just my story but deeper truths about how family can both break us and save us if we're brave enough to face it.